Oh no. Maybe this isn't going to work. I believe we have, in fact, gone live. The spinning wheel of death seems to have disappeared. Indeed. Okay, cool. So here I am hanging out in my office hours. I have my sunless tea here. Um, Sunless tea is sun tea without the sun, since there's no tea, no sun. There is tea. Very good. So I don't really have a plan very much for this. Last time I did this, uh, people sort of showed up and started talking to me. And in fact, this time I want to try and see. I have a Zoom link even, so you can possibly use that to join and talk to me if you wanted to ask a question or have a chat about this stuff. Um, I've seen other people do this. It looks like fun, so I figured I would try it and see who shows up, since sometimes the conversations are pretty good. I've been up here in my office watching this great consciousness debate, recording a reaction to it. So that's been fun. Um, oh, hello. Someone saying hello. Good day. By the way, here I could just be called Richard or One More Brown or Hey You or, you know, whatever else is going on here. So what I usually do in my office hours while I'm waiting for people is watch things on YouTube. I was looking around. There was some things I almost was going to watch, although even though I've been recording this great consciousness debate thing, I saw a couple things that looked interesting that I was hoping to get to at some point. Um, One of them was this debate between Bernardo Kastrup and um, Graham Oppie. On physicalism versus idealism. I've watched that a long time ago, but I thought it might be fun to rewatch it and see what I thought of it after having all of this stuff go on. And then there was, I saw Philip Goff was, I guess, having another conversation or an old conversation with T Jump was floating around. So I was thinking about checking that out as well. But I'm also interested to take questions or talk to people who are here. So if anyone has anything they want to say, then feel free to. Bernardo's theory doesn't address the other minds problem. Yeah, does it? I don't think so. I mean, I think everyone has that problem, the problem of other minds. I don't think there's any special advantage that the idealist has over any other view of consciousness with respect to the problem of other minds. So I think solipsism is not really dealt with very much. People just sort of tend to avoid it and not want to talk about it. But, you know, if you really take seriously this idea, which people like Kastrup do, that you only start with experience and your own experience in particular, and everything else is kind of an inference from that kind of privileged basis, then words the words that you use to talk about minds really only have meaning when applied to your mind. Like when I say I'm in pain, I know what I mean because I've been in pain. When I say you're in pain, well, what do I mean? That you're in a state like mine, I guess. But the reference point, the only way I can make sense or give meaning to the word pain is by reference to my own experience. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that. I'm saying that that's what the idealists, especially like those influenced by Bernardo, think. So if that's what you think, then it does really seem to be a problem here. Or what reason would you have for thinking that there are other minds when the only evidence that you have comes from your own mind? In fact, how could you even talk about other minds when really the meaning of your terms derives directly from only your own experience? I've never seen anyone really deal with that successfully. It's kind of related to maybe the private language argument from Wittgenstein. I think it's different, but I think it's related to that. So I'm interested in that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't really think Bernardo's theory or idealism generally helps you with the problem of other minds. The best we've ever been able to do is the argument from analogy, which is, say you're physically like me, so you probably got a mind or something like that. But for myself personally, I'm happy with there not being like absolute certainty. So I don't think I need to know that there are I don't think I need to have the knowledge of other minds with absolute certainty in order to count as knowing that there are other minds. So I think that we do know that other people have minds, even though we don't know like what minds are. Oh, well, are they physical or not? I think that's an open question, but I think it's safe to say that we know that there are other minds because we can use more relaxed standards in this area. But yeah, that's an interesting question. Pooja Sony was asking why did you bring it up? Does he say somewhere that he does or something like that? I'm not aware of him saying that anywhere. But I'm not like I've seen him say everything he says. All right, so yeah. Does anyone else have any ideas or thoughts about idealism and the problem of other minds? Um, I see there's some other lurkers here. You've not heard BK say that. By the way, for anyone who wants to chat, there's a Zoom link up there. I've never tried this out, but it's supposed to work. So, um, yeah, I wouldn't think that the idealist has any special advantage. In fact, I would say they have this kind of special disadvantage given the way that the theory of perception and introspection that they have. Type Q Physicalism and Josh Weisberg's new book. Yeah, okay, Type Q Physicalism. Bringing me back over here. Okay, so I know Josh. And I went to grad school with Josh actually, and I've known him for a long time. We used to actually play music together. Not that that matters to anyone, but music, I guess I should say, music. But I know he has this new book that's coming out, or it may already be out. Explanatory Optimism and the Mind Body Problem, or something like that, I think it's called. And I read it recently. I didn't know he was working on it till after it was already coming out, and afterwards. I was like, "Hey, why didn't you tell anyone that you were writing a book?" And he said he didn't want to get any objections. Okay, so anyway, the Type Q stuff goes way back. I think Josh and Pete have a paper on this. Pete Mandic, maybe by this name, Type Q. So the Q is for Quine, and the basic idea is supposed to be that someone's trying to. Oh, look at that! Someone's coming in on the Zoom. Here, hold on. Hello, Zoom user.
Hey, there, it worked. um, Hi, I'm Philip.
Hey, how's it going, Philip?
It's going well, thanks. Yourself?
What do you want to talk about?
Well, I was just missing, I just missed what you were starting to say about type Q. Um, I, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, yeah, cool. So you want to keep? Were you the one that asked that? You're not the Andy Stewart from the.
No.
Okay. So Chalmers has this taxonomy of the different responses that one could have. Here, I'm trying to make. I don't know how to make this so we can see each other, but also that. Oops. You know, trying to stream both these through OBS, and I am not good at this. But anyway, so Chalmers has a, given his argument for zombies are conceivable. If they're conceivable, then they're possible. If they're possible,
Hmm.
then physicalism is false. So that's a kind of standard shorthand version of the Chalmers types of argument against physicalism about the mind. And then what he does after that is to go on and classify these various ways you could respond to it, according to which premise you reject. So you have the type A materialist who reject the first premise that zombies are conceivable, basically, and you have the type B physicalists who reject the second premise that they're possible, and you have the type C physicalists who say that we don't know which one of those is false, but maybe one day we will. And then so the all of that really, all of those type A, B's, and C's, that whole alphabet, depends on people taking seriously this idea that we should take conceivability as a guide for possibility, or that we know what we're doing when we're talking about possible worlds and conceiving of physical creatures like us lacking consciousness, blah, blah, blah. So Quine, the philosopher, was obviously very skeptical of those sorts of things, and thought that actually maybe all these notions themselves didn't make sense. So that
Yeah.
talking about possible worlds or what's necessary and what's possible, and trying to use modal logic and reason about these things is just like a dead end. So the type Q physicalist is someone who
Hmm.
says, "Look, I'm a physicalist, but I don't think that there are possible worlds, and I don't want to talk about things being conceivable or possible or necessary. There's just this
Hmm.
world, so that's it." And that the type Q person says, "Look, all of these, the we don't understand these terms well enough to make sense of conceivability arguments or take them seriously." Have you ever heard of this response before?
Okay. Well, not um, articulated that clearly. So that's yeah, that seems to be closest to my own position.
Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, I really, I was listening to uh, yeah, you heard of Robinson Earhart?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I
He
listen
has
to
this.
that podcast when I have the time. Yep, absolutely. Great
Yeah,
podcast, by the way.
um, I was listening to an older episode um, where uh, it was going over the history of um, the name's escaping me right now, but the person he actually interviewed, the other author of this paper, I think it's called The Birth of Semantics, Robert May, I think was the name.
Okay.
So that's an area I would need to study more to have a more well-founded position on this. But just kind of intuitively, I have a deep skepticism for any of that kind of possible worlds.
So you just think that there's
I really
no.
don't.
Sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just uh, it's reasoning purely in uh, like I think you never really are going past a proposition, even any sort of like conclusion you would get from that kind of uh, this was a topic in the interview where they're talking about experimental philosophy,
Hmm.
but really it's not. What are you experimenting with? Like you're just playing around with these predicates that I really don't see how uh, you can gain any meaningful
Huh. I mean, so
things from that.
can I say something back? um,
Yeah.
I don't know this episode that you're talking about. I haven't seen it, so I don't know to what the person is referring. But I guess I want to see what you're saying, which is interesting. So when someone says, like for instance, me, I can't conceive of a square circle. Like it just seems like when I could say the word square circle, but I can't really like understand what it means given what I know about mathematics. It doesn't. I can't do it. Do you agree with that? Like that, starting just from there, do you think that you can make sense of that?
Uh, right. So the um, the meaning of a square is only in its like definition as kind of denoting this um, rectilinear uh, shape. Like so, yeah. I think that it's just an illustration of how um, you can start making very nonsensical um, uh, ideas from getting entangled in just these kind of semantic.
Well, no, I wasn't trying to do that. I was just asking if you, like, when I say to you that, like, I cannot conceive of a square circle, so I sort of
Oh,
know what it means to, like, from at least that simplified point of view, what it would mean to conceive of something. It's like to meet this kind of like reaction. Like I can't do it. Like I can't. Like the
mm,
contradiction is obviously we could trace out why you can't do it because the concept of square
right.
and the concept of circularity. But it's you can imagine someone who didn't really know too much about this who was like, sure, fine, square circle, what's the big deal? And then you would like maybe define square a little bit more carefully, make them think about it. Then perhaps they would go, oh, okay. But like when we're like I'm trying to defend the person, the anti-type Q person at this point. Even though I have some sympathy with that view, but I think that it's not obvious that we should get rid of these concepts because at least at this level we know what we're talking about. When I say I can't conceive of a square circle, but I can conceive of a circle that's infinitely large or finitely larger. So there, it seems like the difference is that one's contradictory and that the other is not contradictory. And then if I want to say, well, okay, wherein does the contradiction lie? Then I can appeal to geometry or analytic geometry or whatever algebra, blah blah blah, and go, there's why it's contradictory. But it's like this intuitive, the notion of it's conceivable centers around its contradictory or not. And then it sort of aligns with what we think the physical world will look like as well at that level, because, well, I don't expect to run into any square circles. And I don't even expect for them to find them on Mars. And I don't expect for us to go like send a probe to Alpha Centauri and for them to send back news we found square circles. So it seems like, at least at that level, I can say, aha, I can know something about the way the world is, or the way I'll encounter it experientially at least, by reasoning about these things. Now, how far you can take it from there, I don't know. But I mean, at least, I don't know if that's playing word games or not. I think it depends. The fact here is that the concepts are very clear. With consciousness, they aren't. But that's part of what the type Q person wants to say, I think, as well. But so, like, my own way to respond to these a priori arguments is to give them whatever they want and say, yes, let's do that. But I can conceive of consciousness as being physical. So there's got to be something that explains this going beyond, like, we're getting at the truth here. But that's different than a type Q response. A type Q response, I think, has a bigger burden because they have to show that actually all of this talk about like conceivability and possibility doesn't work. But isn't just the way inventions work? It's like you conceive of it first, then you try to build it, and I don't know. So it does seem like there's at least an intuitive link between like conceiving of something and it being a way the world could be. At least as long as there's no contradiction there. At least that's where I think they like intuitive umph of the other side gets its start from.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, someone I've been looking at recently is Christine Scarda, and uh, she has written a lot about perception, and her claim is she's done a lot of work on kind of an anti-representationalist position, and
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. Sounds cool.
yeah, it is. So basically, I'm sure I have my notes with me, but she basically says that your typical cognitivist representationalist is trying to figure out, how this kind of bottom-up process is happening, where you're receiving information, and it needs to be stitched together, and she pretty much says, it's really exactly the opposite, where the main kind of hard kind of science evidence she uses for this is looking at olfactory perception, and she's saying how when there's a sense contact, it's just a holistic impression that's happening, and then it's in the like kind of post processing, if you will, where things get picked apart, and it's purely this kind of relational processing, where all the what people would call qualia comes into play, where as things get divided up further and further, then that's where, you know, just the very notion of an object, you know, an object, like an object is happening. It's the result of that process of things getting kind of dissected and um, and uh, I need to read a little more closely, but it seems that that's kind of sufficient in her model to explain um, where the phenomenological, like, you know, my consciousness versus your consciousness comes from.
Hmm.
Is that's every bit as much a part of uh, being able to experience and conceive of a world that is made of you know, entities. Some of them animate, some of them inanimate, some of them conscious, um, and um,
So
yeah,
is this defending physicalism or against physicalism or independent of that?
so she kind of evades the um, it's certainly not non-physical, but but she's trying to come at it from a um, holist perspective that um, you know, wants to reject that distinction in the first place.
The distinction between physicalism and non-physicalism?
Yeah.
I know I never know what people mean when they try to reject that distinction, but
Yeah.
what third category is there?
Well, I would say like that. Yeah, it is physicalist. But uh,
By the way, tell me the name of this person again so I can remember to check this out.
Christine Scarda.
Okay, Christine Scarda. Hmm.
Yeah, because like she
The work I need to look at closer is the one that's addressing the binding problem.
Uh-huh.
and that's where I think
You'd find like
a clear explanation of her stance on
Okay, cool. I mean, I know something about the binding problem, but I don't know her take on it. Yeah, cool. I mean, I'm open to anti-representationalist views, which I think was what you were saying she was having. Um, and I've talked to like the 4E type of people, the inactive and embodied. What's the other E's? Enabled. I don't know. I forget. I like that stuff, but then, yeah, I never really understand like why it's necessary to adopt that sort of view, and how it's like doesn't sort of secretly rely on sort of more traditional cognitive science approach stuff. But yeah, somebody is saying that she's a Buddhist. Oh, maybe no, she looks like she's a Buddhist, so maybe she's a Buddhist. I don't know.
yeah, she became a Buddhist,
in the mid 90s.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
but even among, this is something I've noticed, even among Buddhists, um, there's there's a wide variety of.
Wow.
It's really something that's never been resolved. Is like um, a. I've been looking at this concept that they have of Namarupa, and just kind of studying like the uh, different um, takes on dependent origination.
Hmm.
Um, and uh,
So what is Namarupa? I'm not familiar with it.
that's it's often translated as
mentality, materiality.
Okay.
um, the nama is name and rupa is form.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's basically saying that like
Consciousness arises at the
conjunction of um, those. But I really don't think
Uh-huh.
I need to I need to see if there's some better translations.
that's out there.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I've been trying to get people around here to talk about some of this stuff, and they usually tell me no. I've had trouble trying to find someone to talk about like this aspect of consciousness, like from a non-Western perspective, like from my podcast Consciousness Live. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. But
Maybe reach
yeah,
out to
you can reach out to Jay Garfield maybe.
yeah, I should. Yeah, Jay Carville's a name that's on my list for sure. Yeah, I know. So the the problem is that once I do that, then they either say no right away or yes right away, and then I need to know something. So I'm trying to read stuff before I reach out to the people. But
right.
I do want to get someone on here to talk about that. So, something I think we all should know more about because the contemplative traditions have been studying consciousness for a long time. It's kind of a big lacuna. I mean, I went through all of grad school studying consciousness and never had any class on this stuff at all. It was never a requirement
Hmm.
that I know anything about non-Western traditions, and I was studying consciousness, so it was kind of, it's kind of ridiculous in a way. So we should have more crosstalk. I actually went to Taiwan for a conference. This is kind of non sequitur, but still. And I went to a seminar, a little mini conference, workshop, I guess you call it, on Buddhist traditions and higher order theories, which I was representing kind of analytic philosophy, I guess, Western. And it was really eye opening to see the similarities, the differences as well, but some of the similarities, just a whole bunch of interesting stuff that we need to know more about. But have you read, or do you know Attention Not Self? Have you read that book?
Who's the author?
His name is escaping me at the moment. I have it on the bookshelf back here. Someone Google it and tell me so I don't have to go get the book. I see people are Googling her, and that's how I found out she was a Buddhist. By the way, I'm not a Buddhist. I'm interested in like non-Western and non-Western ideas, but I'm not very religious person. I think of Buddhism as a religion, and like Hinduism and so forth. And like as a little personal, like I have a lot of tattoos. I have a Buddhist tattoo from when I was younger, and now I kind of almost regret it because it's like having a cross tattooed on me. I'm not a Christian. I wouldn't want like some religious iconography. Yeah, that's it, Janari. God, I see. Thank you. Someone did it actually. Thanks, Martin. Jordan Janari, Ganari. It's a really cool book. What he's trying to do is like bring some of these ideas in line with like global workspace theory and some of these other more cognitive sciencey ideas that people talk about. So it's well worth looking into if you're interested in those stuff. I see someone's asking about Hawkwan Lao's latest book too, so I want to talk about that. But anyway, I was just saying that's why, even though I'm interested in non-Western ideas, like I don't think of myself as a Buddhist. I'm kind of convinced by the idea that if you've read Evan Thompson's book, Why I'm Not a Buddhist, because he basically makes the argument that even though he's the influence and practices the ideology, he doesn't like the religious aspect, and it really is a religion to many.
Right.
There's been this kind of purification process where people try to take practices like yoga and various other things and turn them into secular stuff. And I don't know. It's not like I'm super against that or anything. It's just that I kind of I see the point, and I don't really like. I do stretching and stuff, but I don't think of myself as doing yoga because there's a different aspect when you actually practice yoga. So, while I very much appreciate Buddhist ideas and meditation and stuff, I don't really consider myself aligned with that kind of stuff.
Right.
Not that you asked. Already.
No, it's
Yeah, there does seem to be a substantial
overlap with like attention schema.
the idea that like, you know, that with the sixth sense theories, like, and the eye consciousness
Only arises with eye contact and that sort of thing.
is
Yeah. I just talked with Michael Graziano about the attention schema. I don't know if you know.
I only got through the
First half of that, I'm gonna be watching the rest shortly.
Cool. I thought it was a good conversation. He's a nice guy. Interesting. Though he's a ventriloquist and got into this by thinking about puppetry. I didn't talk to him about that, but
That's
sort of
funny.
interesting. Yeah. Doing ventriloquism. Do you know who Hakuan Lao is? Have you heard that
The
name?
name
rings a bell, but I don't know.
I'm only asking you because you're here, and someone in the chat asked me about Hakuan's book. So he wrote a book called In Consciousness We Trust, where he tries to argue for his particular views on consciousness, but it's more of like a manifesto about how you should do consciousness science, I guess I would say. And then at the end, he has some stuff about his theory, his particular version of higher order theory that he's interested in. But yeah, I think he makes a lot of good points about the field of consciousness science, and some stuff I disagree with. I don't, obviously agree with everything he says, but I think it's an interesting book because it's more of a personal account. Like it's more of an account of how he kind of went through science. Like for example, the way he arrives at a higher order theory of consciousness is by trying to refute a certain theory of consciousness, namely the global workspace theory, and realizing that it didn't quite work. So, we have this condition called blind sight, and in blind sight, people have damaged, about blind sight?
Yeah.
So some people interpret that as like, you have a certain kind of behavior, but no consciousness of the thing that you're behaving with respect to. And other people debate that. But Hakuan took that as sort of obvious and wanted to show the global workspace theory was wrong. So he wanted to show that if you controlled for like all of the behaviors, then you would show that the prefrontal cortex wasn't activated and global workspace theory basically was wrong. And when he did that, he found there was a part of the prefrontal cortex that still was activated, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, sort of right where my balding spot is here. So he was like, well, global workspace theory looks like it didn't survive my test. This is doing something. It turns out that area seems like it's involved in metacognition. So you put a bunch of stuff together and you get to a kind of higher order that maybe is involved in a kind of implicit metacognition or thinking about thinking, or what he calls reality monitoring. So I have my reservations about the view, but I think it's interesting. And it's interesting too, more in just like from the theoretical point of view, but to see like how this was like the result of him really struggling with thinking about theories of consciousness.
I'll definitely give that.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's inexpensive because it's from Oxford University Press, so I think it's pretty cheap, like under $20. But still, you could probably find it somewhere floating around too. Not that I'm recommending doing that. Although wink, wink, Let's see. Why, Andy? You're asking Andy, who asked about it in the chat. Do you have any thoughts? By the way, anyone's welcome to join this Zoom discussion we're having. So feel free to drop in if you would like to talk. Let's see. Someone's saying, "Oh yeah, you don't have to steal the book. It's open access." Good point. I'm sure Hakuan would want you to steal the book. Let's see. 4E model emphasizes the importance of an active nature of experience of the senses in general. Present state of cognitive science research should wake up to the idea that matter could be inactive. Well, I don't know what in matter being inactive means. 4E model emphasizes the importance of the inactive nature of experience. What does that mean? So I know what like inactive generally means, but what does that mean here? Shy people can leave their Zoom off, or I'm not requiring that anyone come on the Zoom, by the way. You feel free to not do that. Ew, what happened? Okay. I have so many windows open, I don't know what I just did. Whoopsie. Where am I even? Okay, so here I am. And I'm growing. Yay. Okay, so Whiteheadian panpsychism or process ontology in general. I don't really have a lot to say about that sort of stuff. I think it's interesting. I do know, one of the things that was surprising to me was the philosopher Ruth Millikan, who teaches at the University of Connecticut, or used to. She retired now, but when I went to the University of Connecticut for 1 year, and I met her and studied with her, became friends with her, and have kept in contact with her. I had her on Consciousness Live one time, but it didn't really work out because of technical issues. Back then, I was using Google Hangouts, I think, which was like in beta or something. I forget. It was a long time ago. No one asked. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that I thought of her as a really hard-nosed, physicalist. She's done a lot of work on teleosemantics, really founded a whole branch of it. And, talks about Swamp Man. And I always wanted to talk about consciousness, and she would tell me, Richard, in another lifetime, not this lifetime. It's like, okay, so she didn't want to talk about consciousness. That's her way of saying, that's too hard of a topic. She's done enough work. She's been working on intentionality. She doesn't need to solve all the other problems too. So you got to cut her some slack. Anyway, the reason why I'm mentioning this in respect to the Whiteheadian panpsychism stuff was because the one time I ever did get her to talk about consciousness, where she made some brief remarks about it, she said that she thought there was something to Whitehead's ideas about process metaphysics being a key to consciousness. And I was blown away. I was like, whoa. I did not expect Ruth Millikan to say that she thought maybe consciousness would have something to do with the passing of time or the unfolding of events at the fundamental level. But she said she thought that there was some deep stuff in Whitehead. So I hate to say that that's about all that I know. That's interesting anyway, beyond what everyone already knows. So I do have that one thing to say about Whiteheadian panpsychism. But other than that, yeah, I think that it's one of the options that's interesting. It doesn't get discussed enough. I don't really know of anybody who maybe I'm thinking about it. I do know a couple of people that you could interpret as being one version of this or another. But yeah, it'd be interesting to find someone to talk about this stuff. That's for sure. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, but anyway, about cognitive science waking up to the inactive stuff. I'm not sure really what that means because is the idea supposed to be that like there's a sense in which oh wait, someone's coming over here. Let's switch back. Oh no. Hello. Oh, they're connecting to the audio. But Jennifer's asking about grounding in metaphysics and physicalism. Yeah, I like Jonathan Schaeffer's grounding physicalism. I mean, every once in a while, it seems like. Oops. Hello. Are you there? Donato? Are you muted?
Hello?
Yeah, hello.
Hello. Hi,
How's it
Richard.
go?
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I found you a couple of days actually here on YouTube. I'm studying for actually for the course in Greek philosophy. So
Oh,
there's
cool.
my lecture. So I ran into the live now. So yeah, I want to ask a few questions if you don't mind
Don't mind
about
at all.
consciousness.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to ask, like, why? What is your interest in consciousness? Is just purely theoretical, or it's more like a self investigation? It's like something that you want to find out about yourself. And the other question is because I'm very much interested in consciousness as well, but I'm sometimes not sure if I can understand anything through concepts or through reading or through some kind of words. My idea is that if I want to understand consciousness, I can have some different approach, some kind of meditation in a way of thinking, like some kind of contemplation, something like a deep investigation. Because if I don't have deep investigation, if I don't have a sense of it directly, I'm not sure if I can, if that spark can be lightened up with any book and any words. That, let's say.
Yeah. I see what you mean. I heard someone once make the joke that like trying to study consciousness without these sorts of things is like being a sex therapist without being a virgin. Like, okay, so without having the
That's
experience,
a good one.
I don't know how good it is, but I've heard that one before. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things to say. I think, yeah, we want data. I do not believe that we know enough about the consciousness side of things, let alone the physical side of things, like the brain side of things, to really to get at some of this stuff here. But and different experiences are cool, and meditation, it definitely can lead to a shift in the way you view your experience, and so can certain psychedelic experiences and so forth and so on. I'm all for that kind of stuff to the people who are interested in those sorts of things. But do you have to do that to study consciousness? And is it like the counselor who's inexperienced, the ski instructor who has never skied, or whatever example you want to use? I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. I could see the appeal of that. But on the other hand, we're all conscious, and we all can tell the difference between how things seem when we're hungry and how things seem when we're not hungry, and what it's like to look at something when you're tired and your eyes are blurry as opposed to when you're wide awake and focusing clearly. And I think those kinds of cases are good enough to get at some of the abstract questions. So like if because you asked me, I thought there were two different kind of strands to your question. Like one, it's like, why did I get into this? Is this something, what's my problem? And then the other is like, is there a way that you could study consciousness or be interested in these questions that goes beyond like personal interest or something? That's how I heard what you were saying anyway. Is that sort of what you were saying?
Well, yeah, it's like I trying to understand because some people, in that's in general, there's interest in philosophy. Something I don't want to, I don't want to how to say,
Psychoanalyze me?
yes, like something like that.
Go ahead.
But
We're on YouTube, man. Go ahead.
yeah, so some people just go into philosophy, to sound smart, So
Yeah.
they play with words and they memorize things and they talk about it and they try to quote things and they make a lot of cool terms and combination of terms and they invent new ones and so they go that way. And there's the other interest in philosophy which is more like a contemplative, like the idea of trying to know yourself and trying to understand
Yeah.
what's happening. And those people usually tend to, um, with that when you go with, when you have that approach to philosophy, then you kind of more how to say, y- like if when I thinking about when I'm thinking about the consciousness, I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to get to know it. I'm trying to go into myself and try to find the answers. So yeah, I'm just trying to understand what how is your approach,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
I see. Cool. So, I mean, personally, for me, I was like thinking about these sorts of questions. Like, I think pretty much a lot of people were. I don't think everyone was, but questions about is my pain similar to your pain, or why do things hurt less to me than to you? Like, I have unfortunate childhood, but my was hit as a kid, but it didn't seem to hurt me as much as it hurt my sister. And I was like, well, it's the same thing. Like we're being hit in the same way. So is it a difference in like how we're responding, or is it like feel the same but we're just reacting to it differently? That was something that kind of puzzled me early on by thinking about these sorts of things, or even just like going to the doctor and then saying like, tell me what's wrong, how does it feel? It's like, oh, so how do you? I wish, and I would think to myself like, I wish that they could just like step in for a second and then tell me, is this normal how I feel? Like, I don't know, like which part am I supposed to be telling you about? Because I would wish there was a way that they could know directly like my experience. And I felt like I didn't really know how I could communicate. So that was, from an early age, I felt like puzzled by those sorts of things. And like my mom suffered from migraines and now I suffer from them too. And I wondered, well, how could I help my mom? She's incapacitated. She would be, vomiting in a dark room, no light. She couldn't even, like, it was real bad migraines, like way worse. No medication back then either. So when I went to the library to find out about this, it turned out that, the answer was no one knows why the brain does this or how it works. And I was just like completely astonished by that when I was young, talking, pre-junior high here. So it was those kinds of things which I was puzzled by. I didn't know about philosophy or anything, but then by the time I got to college, and and I was also, my mom was very religious, so I had to deal with that a lot. That's a different question, but I resisted that, and I spent a lot of time arguing about those sorts of things. But by the time I got to philosophy, I sort of felt like, I met the people who were asking the kind of questions that I was interested in, and when it comes to consciousness, I don't really have a considered view. When I was younger, I did, and I thought things were pretty clear. And now I kind of had a visceral experience of feeling like I saw how open all the questions were still when I realized that, like, well, there's a lot of these consistent little packages. You could be one of these guys or one of those. You could subscribe to that view or this, and there's a whole conceptual space where you can map your way through it if you want to. And that was really eye-opening for me. And I really realized that, none of these things are are as certain as we thought that they were. And so in that sense, I do agree that philosophy, the primary like point of it is in a sense to shake, to ask, the Socratic idea that you should ask yourself why I believe this and should I? And to know thyself, that's how I interpret it. Like to take each thing I believe and say, on what do I base this and how should I? And you kind of do that standing in different spots over and over throughout your life. So to me, it's I didn't get into studying consciousness because I want to like answer some deep question about myself. I am curious about these sorts of things, generally speaking, and I'm generally interested in the hardest cases, mathematics, logic, consciousness, the cases that we really don't know how quite they could fit into what we take to be ordinary reality, whatever that is, the stuff that we walk and talk and bump around into. So that's why I got into this stuff. I got into it mostly for that, and I don't really I don't enjoy arguing or it really is kind of, I get sucked into arguments and I feel like I can't help myself, and I don't want to be like that. I want to be more dispassionate about that stuff and like think more objectively about the issues, and I find myself being sucked into like arguing with someone who's like really convinced of a particular view, and I'm like, well, you should open up and see the other side more, and then like I'm sucked into this argument, and I don't enjoy that. That being, I like thinking about the stuff, but I don't like arguing about it.
Yeah, when someone starts argument, it's hard not to go into it, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of pulling you in. They create like a vacuum, and you're just there.
Yeah, but
You
I
know,
like talking about this stuff, but it's a lot of like, it can be exhausting. But anyway, so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's why I got into this stuff. So I want to know about consciousness, because, well, it's the final frontier in a way of our knowledge. And when I was really young, I wanted to be a physicist. That's where I thought. And then I was realized, no, it's not physics I care about. It's these abstract, like ultimate questions. And I didn't know about philosophy. I confused those with physics because no one told me about philosophy.
Yeah. So, I understand. So for example, my idea about consciousness, like if I go deeper into how I got into it, it's like I was raised like a hippie, so I was very early familiar with the idea of meditation and stuff. And when I was a kid, I didn't want to be a Superman. I wanted to be a Buddha. So how was I raised up. But it was not. They're like alternative. How they say, the New Age. They are in that way, and I was like that until I don't know 20. I'm 31 now.
Wow. Okay.
So
Cool.
So the consciousness for me, like I want to understand similar way like you, and I was trying to do it with books. First, that was like some kind of New Age books. Then I went into philosophy. Then I read that. Not sure much as you, but kind of
I'm old, by the way. You're a baby from my point of view, so you have lots of time to read.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, there's time to it. I kind of sometimes I give up idea that I can do something with books. Sometimes I give up an idea that I can that
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're gonna
because
understand
consciousness
consciousness from books,
will,
but I have mixed feelings. Obviously, I work at a university and a teacher, so I recommend. I think it's useful to go to school. I went to school, but I don't think you have to go to college or have book learning to understand this stuff. You could be an autodidact, or you could have tutelage with people who already know. Or, I mean, there's a lot of benefits, and it's a complicated discussion all in itself. But I think that there's a sense in which all of this stuff is based on one's own experience. so that when we are talking about theories of consciousness, we all think we know what we mean, wink, wink, but really it's all based on like this thing that we think we are contacting inside or whatever. And there's differences in how people do that. So, like for instance, me, I apparently have a condition called aphantasia, where I can't picture things in my mind, like visually, auditory I can. And I have dreams that I think I'm experiencing visual stuff in. I think I see things. But like right now, if you tell me to think of an apple, then I cannot picture an apple. But I didn't know about that till I was in my 30s. I was in graduate school and people were talking about the speckled hen in philosophy, which is a problem for mental imagery. And they were saying, like, imagine a speckled hen and how many speckles does it have on it? And this is supposed to be a gotcha moment. Some people are like, oh, I don't know, I can count. I have the picture right here. And I was like, what? Huh? So it was really boggled my mind that there was this ability that people had to fully visually image something when they weren't looking at it. And so like that was news to me, even though I had been an adult human being for my whole life functioning in society, So the point I'm trying to make is that when it comes to like understanding experience itself, I think we have a long way to go, which is where I think that these like meditation and these other kinds of things play a huge role. Phenomenology too, by the way, from philosophical tradition, which is kind of prolonged reflection on experience. So I think all of those things are important. I like the brain. I talk a lot about the brain, but I think the other side of it, from our like the giving a kind of an account of what consciousness is like. Nagel in his BAT paper talked about an objective phenomenology, which was supposed to be some way of describing what it's like to be a human without using words about consciousness or something, which sounds impossible maybe, but if it's not, I mean, we need to like approach something like that where we kind of have a firmer grasp on what the thing is we're trying to explain. Like people say that, oh, the redness of red, the tomato. You get the feeling that all consciousness science is about tomatoes and the redness of them, but really consciousness experience is so much vastly more complicated than the redness of tomatoes. Now, obviously, it's like the redness of the tomato is supposed to be like the electron in a vacuum for physics, it's the simple case or whatever. So I get that. But I think that the point you're making is that, yeah, we shouldn't neglect that other side. You're reading about tomatoes and brain states and all that stuff, but don't forget, like, we live this stuff, and that's where we're really starting from. And we haven't explored that fully yet. So I think there's a role for both. And I wouldn't really want to say that you want to give one up for the other. I say that hopefully they're going to complement each other, but and I like hippies. My mom, I was raised by a hippie as well, but I'm not a Buddhist hippie, but a Christian hippie.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like for me, like one of the interesting, like for example, when I read Nagel, like and something there makes sense. Like, why does it make sense? Like, what clicks in my mind to make sense? Like, because maybe, as you say, we are living it, so we kind of recognize the truth in that book because we have some kind of experience before. So there's like a twofold question I would like to ask. First, like, what do you think happens when we think that we understand something, that then we agree with something that makes sense? And does it, like as we said before, do we need maybe more contemplate and meditate or something similar to that, so we can be able to understand even the deep philosophical concept? This maybe someone who doesn't have that, how to say, that connection with himself and with some kind of contemplative tradition, it's hard to understand deep concepts because he doesn't have anybody to reference. He reads it and he first time hears it. He never really experienced it. He never really thought about it.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And like one of the, like, I don't know if are you familiar with the philosopher Bryce Huebner? Have you heard that? If it doesn't, it doesn't matter. If you don't know who Bryce Huebner is, you should. He's a great philosopher, interesting guy. But he makes the following kind of argument against, for example, people who accept panpsychism or dualism, at least of a certain kind. It's not clear whether he does or doesn't accept panpsychism or dualism or what. But so take the redness of red. A lot of philosophers start with this assumption that there's this kind of simple quality called red. But according to Hubner, if you kind of practice contemplation, meditation, like a kind of, there's different versions of it, like a noting kind where you just kind of note something. The mental state pops up, you note that it's there, you let it pass. And you kind of get used to that. Then what he claims is that you'll kind of recognize that these things aren't simples, actually, that they're kind of made up of a bunch of other stuff, like a wanting or a pulling or a pushing. And so, I'm doing injustice to his view, but that there's a lot of stuff that these things, that the idea that they're simple, that there's something called the redness of red, which resists physical explanation, is itself something that's questionable once you get the phenomenology right, according to Bryce Hubner, remember, or my interpretation of him, actually, 3 steps removed. But anyway, so I take that kind of stuff seriously, because, I have questions about it too, because, I'm not sure where the illusion is. Is the illusion that it's the red, or is the illusion that there's stuff that is deeper than it? But anyway, so the point is that it's not clear whether there are these simple things called the redness of red, which need to be explained, or whether those dissolve into simpler things, which, according to people like Bryce, you could understand how they relate to bodily functions. So I think these are the sorts of things that we aren't clear about, and which a lot of the discussion in the philosophy of mind sort of assumes answers to, and maybe even assumes them glibly, in the sense that the answers are a lot harder than the people take them to be. So, like people are talking about Russellian natural monism and these things. It's like those things depend on this idea that these little simple things, which, these micro experiences that are somehow related to these simple qualities, the redness of red, which we apprehend. The whole argument against physicalism from people like Goff, not from people like Chalmers at least, but from Goff, depends on what he calls revelation, that when we have the redness of red before us, we have all of its essential properties manifest to us. And I think that the Hubner kind of argument is that if you practice contemplation or meditation, you'll see that that's incorrect. So that the very starting assumption that there's this thing that we have a clear grasp on, that we understand its nature or essence right in introspection, is itself questionable. So anyway, I sort of got off on a rant there, but just connecting some of the things that people were saying about in the chat to what we were just talking about here.
Yeah, got it. But I don't know. Like for my interest is was always been like to just kind of understanding and kind of connecting to it. And consciousness is obviously, it's like the end prize, right? But I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I gave up on it. So did you ever feel like that you kind of gave up on studying consciousness? Maybe go back to physics as you thought first.
Well, yeah. There's. Now that you mention it, yeah. Well, not physics, but I stopped doing physics when I realized I was just good enough at math to know that I wasn't good enough at math. Like, that's how good at math I am. I'm just good enough to know that I'm not good enough to do real physics. So I enjoy math and I think about it, but I don't think I could get a PhD in theoretical physics. However, I have thought about, at one point I almost did get a PhD in neuroscience and psychology instead of philosophy. And there was a time when I was really disillusioned. And I have a blog, that's called Philosophy Sucks, with an exclamation point. And it's not an accident that I have that. Part of it's like a joke because of Primus. Like, Primus sucks is a way that people who like Primus say they like Primus. So I was like, haha. But also, I actually think philosophy sucks in a sense, because if it's just philosophy, then I think you're just grinding concepts and intuitions, and I don't think that that's useful at all. If it's disconnected from the empirical work, then I just think you could say whatever you want, and people do. And so I was really disillusioned with debates, and I'm talking about philosophy of mind, like, between representationalism and non-representationalists, between in epistemology over Gettier cases. I mean, kind of well-known stuff where there's just a million thought experiments and people are arguing about how. For example, when I was in grad school and people were arguing about twin Earth and what is there water on twin Earth, and that was such a huge topic. It's like, is there water on twin Earth? And that's like, is this really what we're doing here? Like, this is, and it's interesting. Like, I will start arguing about it if someone says something. I have a view about it. But is it saying anything interesting or important? And my view was like contrary to most people, by the way. What was another of Putnam's example? He said if we found out that like the cats here on Earth were Martian robots, then we would say that that we have discovered a new fact about cats, that they're robots, as opposed to saying that there just aren't any cats. I was just like, how do you get to say these things? Like, I would say, no, cats are animals. Is analytically true. So anyway, I was very disillusioned. And then when I moved from California to Connecticut and then eventually to New York, coming to New York was really another one of these experiences where I just like, it seemed like sort of what you were saying before, that people were like more interested in seeming smart than they were in seeming like that they were interested in answering the question or getting to the bottom of things. And I read that Dennett paper, like Higher Order Truths about Schmess. It came out like right around that time where he was like saying, that Schmess is his game of chess that involves moving the king 2 spaces instead of 1. He was like, okay, so there's lots of interesting things you could say about it. His analogy to the twin Earth stuff is like you could get caught up in that stuff, but is it interesting or important? And I sort of felt that way at that time. I almost wanted to go into the other field, but I really, the elm and the birch, exactly. So, I didn't, because I just think that there's something important about philosophy, and it has something to offer, and not that these other things don't, but that there is something important here. So yeah, I did feel disillusioned, and you go through periods of it, and then once I became a professor, I became disillusioned again, and it does sometimes feel like there's this kind of in crowd that's always giving the same talks and always at the same wine and cheeses, and it's a big highfalutin wine and cheese rubbing of elbows, and where's the search for the truth? Like, anyway, so I do. It does get frustrating, but that's like the way it is with everything, right? So you go through your ups and your downs and stuff, but yeah. So I don't really
give like.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I can give. I don't know if I no, nobody asked, but like my path is like I was very I was working I was working a lot with philosophy, and I was studying it a lot and working on it, and I kind of just gave up on it. And I actually went to became a programmer. I learned coding by myself, and I just started working on that field. And years passed, and I kind of find myself a little more shallow than before. A little more my thinking, my way of thinking, my way of self consciousness was kind of off a little bit, and I kind of felt something missing. So I went back to philosophy, and I felt some kind of not to get too how to say spiritualistic, but some kind of light kind of shine a little more inside of me, and I felt myself a little more wiser to any kind of problems that happen in my life. Not because I knew more, but because I wrestled with it more. I ask myself a lot of questions. I go into those contemplation, reading any book, and kind of the book was kind of more like a practice with me, like a practice, like I'm trying to figure out something, and just going in those directions in my mind kind of open more sensibility to other problems in my life. So I kind of that was my path, and so uh, I kind of get a lot from it. Maybe I can ask that question as well. Like, what do you think is the some kind of wisdom that we feel one people have and other people don't have? Like, what is we don't have to go too much into the ethics of it, but just like do those people have some kind of more knowledge, or is there some kind of more than knowledge? And yeah, what do you have some thoughts about it?
Do I have thoughts about wisdom and knowledge?
Yeah, like what is the so for example, there's a like idea, there's some kind of the people that is knowledgeable, they have a lot of information, right? But someone who have wisdom have a lot of he can kind of create things, he can kind of solve things more kind
Yeah.
of more skillfully.
I mean, I know the old joke that, the difference between wisdom and knowledge is that you can know that it's raining, but a wise man will go inside. So I guess that's the Aristotelian, from going back to Aristotle, actually, that there's a kind of wisdom which is practical wisdom, or knowing how to use the knowledge, a skill, how to do something with what you know. And I do think that there's something to that. I mean, I don't think I have anything to say about it. I think of myself as kind of just an ordinary person who, with a YouTube channel. So I don't think I have any deep insights into any of this stuff. I've the only difference between me and most people is that I've met Saul Kripke. That was because I went to the grad center and he happened to hang out there. But that wasn't because of any special thing about me or anything. But it's like, yeah, I met some interesting people and I've talked to them. But I don't really feel I have any deep insight into these sorts of things. Except for that, the older that I get, the more I sympathize with Socrates, in the sense that I really do start to think that what knowledge is, excuse me, not what knowledge is, but what wisdom is knowing that you don't know. And that when Socrates said that he knows that he doesn't know, and therefore he's wiser than most men, when I first read that as a grad student, I thought, he's contradicting himself. How do you know that you don't know? Ha ha, yuck, yuck, yuck. But the older I get, I recognize that there's something deeply profound about that. And most people don't have this, actually. They think they do know. Not about everything, but about some things, about the important stuff. And it seems to me that what the value of philosophy, where it primarily lies, is in this personal service it does for oneself, in letting one know one doesn't know. Of course, I mean, I'm going to be talking to this philosopher Eric Schwitzgebel soon, on Monday, but he talks about philosophy that opens versus philosophy that closes, philosophy that tries to open your mind, expand the possibilities, versus philosophy that tries to defend a particular view and shut out other views. So, not all philosophy is aimed at this, but even that other stuff I think is useful, because what we're interested in, again, is mapping out, in my opinion, is mapping out the space of where you should or shouldn't go, or where you can start from and get to, and where you can't start from, and where you can't get to having started from someplace. So, I would say that the primary value of philosophy lies there, and the rest is making a living.
Yeah, I've found very much with the Socrates idea of not knowing, and his idea, as I understand it, is the major job of philosophy is actually clearing our minds of false ideas that we have. Because if we have a false idea in our mind, we are trying, when we have a new information, we're trying to build on top of the information that we already think is true. And
Yeah.
if that new information doesn't correspond with the previous beliefs, we will discard it, right? So the idea is that we have to be very careful in the things that we believe. And
I mean, not to interrupt you, but
have,
sorry, I did interrupt you. So sorry. Go ahead.
no, I'm just trying to circle around that point to make it more powerful. So the idea that that the importance of philosophy is to clean your views, and because if you don't if you have beliefs that are not true, you're yeah, you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I forget what I was going to say when I interrupted you, but it's
Yeah, you did
I'm
that
sure
to
of
me. So
no, I'm sure it's of no importance. Yeah, but I guess I was talking about the Socratic. Oh yeah, I know. I remember what I was saying, or gonna say in my head. I was saying. So it's. I don't know if I'd say it's philosophy's job to do that. You know, Socrates. Who knows what Socrates thought because he didn't write anything down, and his student who did probably most certainly embellished a lot of stuff, namely Plato. So whatever, take everything with a grain of salt, you know. But Socrates, as I understand it, it's the philosopher's job, not philosophy. You could be, you know, the sophist of the day who only cared about money and didn't care about, you know, philosophy or truth or whatever big capital letter thing you're interested in. They certainly were exposed to arguments and ideas and stuff, but they weren't like led to the philosophical life, according to Socrates and those ancient Greeks, right? And they weren't led to the philosophical life because, I mean, I guess if you buy the allegory of the cave and all that stuff, because no one led them there, and that was the role of the person in the cave. They got to free you. Like you don't do it on your own. Someone has to be there harassing you, saying, "Why do you think that? What's going on?" And in a way, I think that when you study philosophy, when you really do it, whether in school or not, I just mean when you really take philosophy seriously, I think you internalize that Socrates. So instead of having to have someone follow you around saying, "Why do you think that? What's your justification for it?" When you really get to a certain point, that voice is there. You've built it in. And when you find yourself a question, making an assumption, you go, okay, so why do I think that? Now, I don't know. I mean, I've met tons of philosophers who are arrogant pricks that don't do this at all, I would say. So I'm not saying like being a philosophy makes you this way, but I'm saying this is the ideal. I would, that when you do the Socrates thing right, he's supposed to come and release you by asking you these questions and forcing you to recognize that you don't know the things you thought you knew. And if you do the professional philosophy thing right, or the serious study of it right, you internalize that. So you're always doing that. And you know, it's funny when I'm watching these debates online between a lot of like, particularly in religious areas, but even in consciousness areas, there's a lot of not that happening, or people thinking, gee, if you don't know something, you admitted that you're wrong. And if you actually say that you're not sure what the answer is, then my view, which says the answer is clearly X, is preferable. And I've always been very suspicious of that move, because just because you're very confident about your view doesn't seem to me to mean, you know, anyway, so I don't want to go off. I'm going way too down a tangent, but I think that the internalizing that Socratic critic is a very important thing to do, as far as like
yeah,
developing mentally.
yeah, I agree, and I think I did the same. You know, the internalization, because before I have more firmer beliefs, and with age, you know, with my old 31, I kind of find myself a little less certain about things, and which kind of puts you in position, and as you mentioned before, that you don't like to argue, and you kind of like more to talk. But it's kind of hard to not to just to talk with people who have firm beliefs, because when you're talking, you're trying to figure out something together with the person. Okay, let's
Yeah,
see. You're
exactly.
asking yourself, are you right? But if you're someone, try to push and try to dunk on you as soon as you're a little bit not sure of things, it's kind of hard not to push back and try to put a counter
Especially
argument.
when they're really, I mean, you know, I never thought I was going to write like a paper on zombies. I went through, not that you asked me this, but I went through all grad school. No one mentioned zombies or Chalmers. I never read any of that stuff. And then I met someone through my blog, actually, who said, "Hey, you moron, don't you know that zombies have proven physicalism is wrong and you're an idiot?" And I was like, what? I'm wrong because of zombies? I didn't know that. So I had to go and find out about all this stuff. And then I realized, oh yeah, there's a whole, like, we have proven the world a certain way by thinking about it camp of people out there. And it really kind of astonished me. And back then I just thought, gee, this is malarkey. But by trying to understand why people who were smart believe what I thought was malarkey, I came to realize, okay, so there's more than malarkey here. But yeah, I mean, it was mind-boggling to me to find out that people took that so seriously. And that's how you get sucked into how I get sucked into these arguments is like, it's like, I think the questions are more nuanced. And then someone comes along and says, no, it's obviously X. I'm like, well, but, and then the more they're like, it's obviously X, the more I want to be like, but obviously you're wrong. And that's a character defect in me, which, I believe it or not, I do
Yeah,
try to fix, but I don't enjoy that process.
Yeah, as soon as you say them they are wrong, then you have a firm position, and now you have to defend it.
Exactly.
And neither there. Not to go too much into sensitive topics, but it's happened a lot with me with COVID and stuff. When I was trying, people said, you should do this, you should do that. I was like, yeah, I'm not sure. And then I'm always in a position of, defending the opposite position of the person that have, I'm always like a devil defend because I was not sure if, one is true or other.
Exactly.
But, yeah,
Well, I won't.
Sometimes hard.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about that, but I will say that one of the ways that I often try to figure out what I think is by arguing for the opposite. So a lot of time, I mean, not maliciously or anything, but I just want to see like what are the arguments against this view. Like, so if you really want to know something about like panpsychism, like try to argue against it to someone who believes it. And then you might find you adjusting your views. And that's often what happens is like the way I think about philosophy often is like other people are like smarter, better versions of me. Like, I want to know what I should think about this. So I'm going to say it to you and you're going to tell me what's wrong with it or why I should think X, blah, blah, blah. And then I get to put that in the loop and evaluate that. And then if I change my mind or not, that's great. But I want to think of like, you're giving me reasons to update my views. Like, what are these reasons? And that's why I don't really care about rhetoric and stuff like that. I don't care about if I'm an idiot or if you think so-and-so destroyed so-and-so. I'm more interested in okay, so what are the reasons and should I accept those and how do they fit into this whole grand map about like arguments that I have in my head already? Those are the things that I'm interested in. And I don't always perfectly live up to that standard. Like, I'm a human, I'm an ass too sometimes, but that's what I do try to live up to. But hold on, I see someone over here. Sorry. I was just going to say, I see someone in the chat asking about gradualism. Do you have a view about consciousness being gradual or all or nothing?
Gradual. I'm not sure. I see like before I jumped in, I see there's a lot of talk with some kind of a special terminology, if I might say. So I'm not that much familiar with it. But please, if you can explain the question.
Well, I mean, they could say more if they want to. But as far as I understand, let's see, it's Victor Barcelos, I think. Barcelos. I think the idea is, so for me, my own personal view is that when I think about like consciousness, phenomenal consciousness, I think about there being something that it's like. And then there's different ways that it's like for me. Like, it could be like seeing red. It could be like hearing a trumpet. It could be like having this conversation. Lots of stuff. And we want to make distinctions and blah, blah, blah. Great. But when I wake up in the morning, like when I first open my eyes and I'm in a groggy kind of state and I'm like, what day? I don't even know what day it is. Some days I'm not even sure what my name is or like what. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, what do I got to do today? Okay, let's go. But there's a moment there where I don't know what the heck's going on. And so when I'm kind of staring over at the lamp or the window or whatever, it's kind of foggy and hazy and not clear. But there's definitely something that it's like for me at that point, I would say, in the morning. It's not very, like the contents of what it's like are not clearly defined or delineated. So it's like, it's like foggy and hazy or whatever, but it's there. There's something that it's like. And now I'm looking over here and the window's over there. It's very clear. It's not foggy or hazy like that. So it would seem to me, from my point of view, that I can make sense of there being a kind of gradualism in the content of consciousness, a kind of, you are aware of it in a very precise and clear way, or you're aware of it just generally, or like the other day, I opened up the closet and saw the jackets in there, and there was a jacket I saw very quickly when I opened the closet. It was red. Someone said, oh, is that so-and-so's red jacket? And I was like, oh, that's that particular color red. Well, I don't know if that one in there was that color. But I knew it was red because I kind of got a brief glimpse of it. So I kind of had this kind of, you might think, generic experience of redness that wasn't like of a particular shade, maybe, if that's possible. That's how it seemed. So that seems kind of Like there's this gradual, you can draw cases from there being kind of indeterminate to it being very clear. But not with respect to what it's like in general. So you can make that distinction, in my opinion, about the content of what it's like what it's like is vague or what it's like is specific. But some people want to say that there's like levels to like the consciousness itself, not just to the content of the consciousness. So on these kind of views, you could have, vague what it's likeness, not in the sense that I was talking about, where the thing you're aware of is kind of not clearly delineated. Like in an impressionist painting, instead of painting all the fingers on a hand, they might just put a blob there and it gives you an impression of 5 fingers. But if you actually looked closely at the paint, you would notice there's not 5 fingers there. But nonetheless, there's something there, right? So the other guys want to say, no, there could be some kind of like in between where it's not nothing that it's like for you. And it's not quite like all the way something that it's like for you, but that in between state of there sort of or kind of or partially being an experience or something that it's like. And there I have trouble understanding what they mean. I certainly know that like some views of consciousness are committed to this. Like Dennett, for example, he's very clear. He says, like when he talks about dogs and animals, he's sometimes said that maybe there's nothing that it's like to be a dog, and people go, ah, like they start gasping. You can see why, but Dennett has whatever his views were before, he's updated his views or done something where he says now, well, maybe there's just like this kind of vague indeterminate, like maybe it's kind of sort of like something to be a dog. And maybe it's even less kind of like something to be a snail. And maybe it's even sort of less kind of like something to be an amoeba. And it's just this kind of gradual chain from like where we are to where this amoeba is. And at every point in that chain, there's going to be some percentage of what its likeness. And notice it's not like what it's like in the sense of the thing you're aware of being indeterminate. It's just like kind of sort of like something. So people say they can make sense of that view. And I guess if I try really hard, I can kind of like, but then it starts to overlap with this other idea that no, it's the thing I'm aware of. That's kind of like I'm experiencing it in a vague way. It's not the thing, it's not the awareness itself, which is vague. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of went on for a long time there. So I'm not sure, Victor, you had something more to say about that, or Donato, if you also, I was talking to you, but that's my position, is that I understand very clearly in one respect what it would mean for there to be levels of consciousness. In the other sense, I don't understand it very clearly. I do think that some theories are committed to there being levels of consciousness like this, but I don't understand what it would mean. Let me just say, like, I do know what it would mean to be half asleep, but not fully asleep. So if you're talking about like creature consciousness, I do understand it. To be half asleep is to be partially awake and partially asleep. To be groggy, and I even know about, hypnagogic reverie and all of these weird in-between states. Hypnagogic reverie, by the way, is that weird in-between state where you're like sort of dreaming, but you're kind of awake. And you're incorporating things in your room or in bedroom or whatever into this weird dream state you're in, and very bizarre things. Like once I thought I put a car in my pocket. It seemed totally normal to me, to take the car from the driveway and put it in my pocket. And it was like a visual experience. I thought I was awake. It's like, okay, so it's in between. So I sort of understand what it would mean to be in between awake and in between being asleep. But what would it mean to be in between being conscious and in between not being conscious? And I see, like Martin saying, it sounds like meta consciousness, and that's not what it's supposed to be, because meta consciousness is like you have the what it's likeness, and then you can be aware of it in like a certain way. But according to these guys, it's the consciousness itself, which is fuzzy or degraded or partial. or in this in-between state of being sort of consciousness and sort of not consciousness. So, for example, this would be the view that a person like Dennett would take with respect to the dog in the global workspace theory. So dogs, well, dogs are a special case because they've been co-evolving with humans for too long. But, take some other animal like an aardvark or something like that. So maybe they have an element of a global workspace. So a global workspace is some thing in the brain which takes information and broadcasts it and makes it available. Makes it available to many other sources, and so forth and so on in the brain. So what was it? Aardvarks? What did I say? Do they have one of those? Well, they have elements of one. They have parts of one that kind of have one. Is it just like ours? No. So if you think that the global workspace is what consciousness is, then do they have consciousness? Well, kinda. They sort of have this thing. So, this was the Peter Carruthers line. Peter Carruthers wrote this whole book called, Putting This Animal Question to Rest, or what, I forgot the name of it was. Putting the animal consciousness and the animal question, putting it to rest, or something like that. Where he basically says, look, I believe global workspace theory is true. Global workspace theory has no clear, definite predictions about whether or not this animal or that animal has the global workspace. So it just doesn't say, you can't really answer the question, is the animal conscious in this sense? You can just say it kind of is. It has that element. So, it's not supposed to be self-consciousness or awareness of being aware of something, but it's supposed to be the awareness itself is partial or degraded. But more than the contents are partial and degraded, it's that the consciousness itself is like kind of not consciousness, which I don't really understand. So that to me, I'm out of my. This was my sunless tea I was drinking, with sun tea made with no sun. I'm out. By the way, guys, this is a lot of fun and I'm having a great time, but I do have to kind of go by 3 because that's when the kids get out of school. So then I have to transition to dealing with reality mode. So we got a few more minutes. But anyway, so yes, I agree. I don't get it as well. People talk about this, but I have real trouble understanding it. Some people have even argued that, if you're a panpsychist, you're kind of committed to this this view. There's this paper by Jonathan Simon. Well, Philip Goff responded to it, but it was in this book that I edited. From Consciousness Online, the online consciousness conference that I used to organize before it got to be too much work. It would probably be less work actually nowadays with how technology has progressed, but I really enjoyed doing the online consciousness conference. Sadly, my work said, you've done enough of those, and didn't really want to wasn't encouraging me to do more in order to pursue my tenure, unfortunately. But anyway, I probably could go back to it now. My point, though, is I don't even know what my point was. This business about consciousness being indistinct is hard for me to understand. Someone's asking me if I'm sympathetic to the naturalistic critique of analytic metaphysics divorced from empirical data. Yes, I am. Very much sympathetic to that, but I'm also sympathetic to not that. So, me. But yes, I understand why you would be very worried about this sort of thing. I guess tonight I'm going to put you in the waiting room. Are you still here, by the way? Sorry, they can come back if they want to. Okay, so we're going to have to be wrapping up anyway, I guess. At some point. I switched. So I am sympathetic to the critique of analytic metaphysics. But I'm also sympathetic to analytic metaphysics. I mean, that's why my own response to the zombie argument has been to try to challenge it on its own territory and to say, look, even if you give them everything that they want, you don't get a refutation of physicalism. So even if you think that you can know from, by conceivability what is possible, you haven't ruled out the conceivability of consciousness being physical. And I don't mean, obviously, the conceiving of the necessary truth that physicalism is true, but rather just that there's a creature who's physical and has consciousness, and that's it, no non-physical properties. I think that's perfectly conceivable. I think physicalists are conceiving of that when they write their theories out. That's what they have in their mind. There's no obvious contradiction. It's not like the square circle case that we started off talking about at the beginning of this. There's no obvious contradiction. There's, you may wonder how is it possible and all that stuff. And that's fine. That says something about you, I would say. But it just seems to me that it's like, if you want to take all that stuff seriously, then you would have to show there's some kind of contradiction in physicalism itself, and that hasn't been done. People pretend that it's been done. I haven't ever seen it been done. So, I mean, this is why I was thinking about that Bernardo Kastrup debate with Graham Oppie, which I was thinking about rewatching at some point, maybe, even though I did see it a long time ago. But I sort of remember them talking about like the identity theory, and that's what my strongest view in philosophy is, like associated with the identity theory. If the thing I come closest to believing is something like the mind-brain identity theory, even though I don't actually believe it, is the thing I would believe if I was like actually gonna like believe something. Anyway, so I don't think that it's contradictory, because I think I would have noticed it. And even though I think that I believe things that maybe were contradictions without noticing, after thinking about it for 20 years, you would have think I would have noticed it, or that someone would have pointed it out to me. And instead, what people have pointed it out is not that there's a contradiction in the identity theory, but that they find it very strange. And that's not the same. So when people say they find something very strange, I go, cool. Yay. I mean, lots of people find things strange, so I'm not moved by that. So anyway, how did I start off this? Because someone asked me about analytic metaphysics. Yeah, so I'm sympathetic to the Quine stuff, but I'm also sympathetic to not it. And I do think we sort of know, and even like the Quinean case, like I'm sympathetic to the Chalmers response to the Quinean case, where even so, when you think what you're doing is like getting rid of a concept, like, because that was part of Quine's big argument, was that well, I just noticed someone saying something in the chat that it distracted me, but anyway, so I forgot what I was saying. Something about Quine. I know that much, but so I'm skeptical of it, but I'm also not skeptical of it. Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. Because even in the case where he thinks that everything is revisable, it's not clear. So I'm kind of worried about the Kripke kind of arguments that logic can't really be adopted in the way that Quine argued that it could, that you can't just pick a logic and go with it. That there's something fishy going on here with like there's some bits of logic that we can't revise, that kind of built into us in some sense. Now, whatever you take that to mean is, yeah, that was. It was directed to you. Not in a bad way. I just read what you wrote. But it's... not clear that what you're going to get is a revision of the concept. Excuse me, a jettison of the empiric experience telling you that you have to get rid of the concept, or you just revise the concept. So take the cat example that I was mentioning earlier with Putnam. So suppose we find out that cats are alien robots and that they weren't animals at all. This is supposed to be a counterexample to cats are animals, quote, being an analytic truth. Cats are animals is supposed to be some true by definition. It's part of the meaning of a cat that it's an animal. And if we found out that they were really Martian robots, then what would we say? We'd say, well, gee, there are cats, according to Putnam, there are cats. They're just not animals. So that even this analytic truth, that we can't, even things which are true by definition can be sort of revised by experience. Of course, the response to that I think is fairly straightforward and works, is that, there's two concepts. One, cat is animal, and other, cat is Martian robot. And you might call them cat 1 and cat 2. And cat 1 is animal, is an analytic truth. Cat 2 is an animal, is not, because cat 2 is the concept of the cat as a Martian robot. So what we would do in that case, it seems to me, the right answer is that if we ever found out cats were robots, we wouldn't simply say, I guess cats aren't animals. Therefore, by definition, we analytic truths can always be revised by experience. We'd say, no, our definition was wrong. This other concept is the right one. Cats are robots. That's the right one. So that's it's still analytic. It's just that we kind of revised the definition. So the conceptual change thing, I think, is a real something that the Quineans haven't really taken. I mean, they have now since, this has been around for a few years now, but I think this is an interesting debate. So I am sympathetic to that, but I'm also sympathetic to the other side, yes. I don't know if I was rambling on this, I was distracted, so I don't know if I actually finished or said anything coherent about that. I'm getting tired, I guess. We've been going for a while, but let's see, life and consciousness. I do have Amir is asking me about my 5 main thoughts on life and consciousness. I would like it to be the case that life and consciousness are associated. That is something that I think would be cool, but I just don't know. So I almost wrote a paper for this Journal of Consciousness Studies thing. They invited me to, and they were harassing me to get it done by a certain deadline. I didn't complete it by that deadline, because I'm a slacker. But I did want to write it, and I was basically trying to defend a view that I was trying to call neuropsychism. So the idea that it's not just all living things, but all the brains. It's brains. So what I would like to think is that it's neurons that matter. And that neurons are the things which are conscious are the things with neurons, and the things with neurons are the things which are conscious. Now, so there are some things that are alive but don't have neurons. So they would kind of be out by this standard. And I don't know, so like trees and stuff, do they get in? Well, they don't have neurons, but they have some kind of signaling between them and stuff. So you can kind of push this view back. And I had a person I talked to, Monica Gagliano, who is a defender of the view that life is conscious through and through, in a way more robust way than you might think than her scientific work suggests. But like that they have phenomenal consciousness and stuff, switches. So my main reservation with that is just that all the things that plants do are things that we think can be done unconsciously in humans. So the things which non-brained systems do, I should say, that systems without brains, what those things do, not respecting large language models, which someone mentioned, but those things that are having no brains, they seem to do the sorts of things which in us is not conscious. So for example, classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is when you pair stimulus A with stimulus B. Stimulus A with response B. So here's a response to the world, here comes a stimulus, and they get paired. that happens in humans all the time. It has a long history, blah, blah, blah. Maybe even plants do it. I don't know. I got an email from lots of people, not lots, but a few, saying, be careful about this plant stuff. The science isn't good. So I don't know. I think the jury's out on this. It's not clear, but certainly it's obvious that plants are more complicated than the average person thinks that they are, certainly than the average person 20 years ago thought that they were. So plants are pretty cool. But I don't know, the giving tree has been around for a while, so maybe people are sort of knowing how cool plants are to some degree. But you'd be surprised how sophisticated plants are and what they actually do. So, but does that mean they have experience or phenomenal consciousness? I don't know. They do cool things, but if in humans cool things can be done without consciousness, then in plants cool things could be done without consciousness. So it really hinges on, is it really the case that things like that are done in humans without consciousness? And I think the answer is yes. Now, how high up the level you can go into the level of coolness, I don't know. But yeah, so I'm open to the idea that there's that consciousness and life are coexistent. I could see why people have a deep attraction to that view. Like I understand why you would have that view, but I also am skeptical of it for the reason that I just gave, namely that the things which life does, the life without brains, life without neurons, what it does looks like things which are mostly non-conscious in humans and other animals. But I could change my mind on that. Do all living things have conscience? That's kind of the view I would take on that. But as far as like how far down the chain do you go? I mean, I'm very open to the idea that it's everything with the brain. So like ants and bees like would be in, obviously. Whereas I know other people that are not into that and think that no, like even I was talking with Michael Graziano, he thinks frogs. No frogs. I was like, oh, frogs. They're so cool though. So, and even though I like higher order theories and all that, I would like to think that frogs could have the kind of higher order states that I'm talking about. If they don't, I would be like bummed. So that my like I have some I'm sympathetic to the view life and consciousness go together. I'm more sympathetic to the view that it's brains and consciousness that go together. So that's how I would say with that. But anyway, so someone is saying reductionism is always going to be incomplete. So I don't really know what that means. I guess reductionism is a tricky concept because what do you mean by it? Do you mean like theoretical reduction of a theory to another theory where you have to provide some kind of linking terms between theory A and theory B? Or do you just mean like finding out in reality that A is B, like when we found out lightning is electrical discharge? So there's sometimes people call that, theoretical and ontological. I don't know. I don't think it makes sense to talk about reduction if it's ontological reduction. So when people talk about ontological reduction, that doesn't make sense to me in the sense that if there's really only one thing there, you can't reduce one to the other. So like, what are you talking about? Like if lightning is electrical discharge, then it's not two things, lightning and electrical discharge, which you then are trying to make into one. There's one thing. So this is what sometimes I talk in my past life, I called it epidentity, and like an epiphenomenal identity, where people say they're identical, but then treat them as though they're not. So the most obvious place where this really happens is music theory. So, if you go to someone and say, here's the C major scale, and then they play it, and then you ask them, is E sharp in the C major scale? Musicians will say, no, F is in the C major scale. You say, but isn't F and E sharp the same note? And they'll go, no, they're not the same note. No. And you go, but gee, you hit the same thing to make both sound. They sound the same, but they're not the same note. So that's enharmonically identical. In music theory, they sound the same, they make the same sound, but they're different notes. So what do they really mean? Oh crap! I know. Don't forget the kids, Martin. Jesus, thank you. I won't. My wife's getting them from the bus. I just have to be downstairs by the time they come running through the door. So my wife's very nice. It's not like they're getting off the bus and I should be out there. But thank you. I do have to go. But anyway, so enharmonically identical but distinct notes. So that's a way of saying they're the same but treating them as though they're different. Obviously, metaphysically, they're the same. F sharp and E sharp and F are the same note. They are not different metaphysically, but yeah, you write one in this scale and you write the other in that scale. You put it E sharp when you talking about the C sharp major scale, because that one has all sharps in it, don't you know? And then you say, but isn't that F? No, that's E sharp. Different note. So musicians really make a big deal out of this kind of stuff. And it's because it's useful. It's useful, like practically, to distinguish E sharp from F. It makes sense in our theory that we can talk about the circle of fifths in a way that makes perfect sense. And it's not contradictory. It actually is a half step above E, so it is both. Okay, great. So, but a lot of people treat them other identities in that way, where they try to identify them, but then they conceptually are treating them as other distinct, like lightning and electrical discharge. So I think that the ontological reduction isn't going to make a lot of sense for that reason. It's not two things there. There's nothing to reduce. And so in the case where you don't have theoretical reduction, like a bridging conceptual link between theory A and theory B, then, you're not reducing anything really. You're just finding out the nature of the thing. Or at least that's how I would say. But anyway, I see lots of other interesting comments. I wish I could hang around and respond. I'm going to start doing these regularly, these office hours. So I enjoy these discussions. People have been coming by, really interesting comments, making me think about stuff I don't usually think about. So I really enjoy it. Appreciate everyone stopping by and chatting with me. Even if you don't come on the Zoom link or whatever, even if you do, even if you're lurking or whatever. So thanks to everyone for stopping by. And Monday I'll be talking with Eric, and I'll be doing another one of these next week. I'm gonna try and do one of these office hours a week. For now, maybe on Fridays, eventually maybe switching to Mondays. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Don't hold me to any of this stuff, guys. But until the next time, later.